We competed at everything. He would tell me things like, I'm getting pretty good at skiing moguls, or by this time next summer, my body's gonna be ripped. You should see my slalom moves, or when you see me next year, I'm gonna have long feathered hair. Tim really had cool style that I admired. He would tell me things that he was saving up for, like his first car was a Chevy Nova. His Marantz stereo, it had this heavy wheel, tuner wheel, that was really important to him. His Techno Pro skis, his Tiger Paw snow tires. He loved to tell me how he researched it all, and this was before the internet, so he researched it and he was going to get the best deal possible. Tim was a natural leader. He jumped into adulthood with ambition and courage. He and Todd got their own place after high school, and Tim worked multiple jobs while earning an associate's degree from ECC and then a BS in construction technology from Buffalo State. He married Lori in September of 1992, and they hosted a really fun wedding where all his friends were there and they played the music really loud, just like Tim liked it. In a short time, he had his daughters Kaylee and Amanda and a job at Niagara Candy and a house on Grand Island. Wow, I remember being really inspired. He'd surpassed me with all his accomplishments. I was really impressed. Tim took pride in his career. He reveled in hard jobs, eventually working with his brother at Todd and Metcart Pipe, and then later as a union sprinkler fitter, where he stayed until retirement. He would share the details of all the mechanical issues that he worked on. He felt accomplished when late in his career, he called me one time to say he could keep pace with kids half my age. On one of his last assignments, he volunteered to run a telescoping low lift, which I had to look up, I wasn't sure what it was. But he taught himself how to operate it, raising supplies to the second and third mezzanine levels, since none of his coworkers had the balls to run it themselves and the job had to get done. For almost 35 years, Tim worked part-time at Clark Craft, cutting out boat patterns. He started there as a teenager, and when Clark Craft finally closed, he called me up on a Saturday morning from a parking lot, and he said, I don't know what to do with myself. He was really nostalgic. Tim was committed to seeing family at Christmas. For 55 consecutive years, he never missed the extended Christmas gatherings on his mother's side, the Perry side. And this is no small feat considering it was a 300-mile drive to my grandparents' farm in White Creek, New York. This past Christmas was the first time he was absent, but Tim wisely chose to stay home to greet Amanda returning from Texas. Tim, Todd, and I greet each other as Doughboy. But it was Tim who coined this phrase when we were about 10 years old. My grandmother had given us $5 to go to the county fair, And I was sitting in the back of the car and I said, I'm going to get a Doughboy, but I was referring to a concession stand. And Tim was like, okay, Doughboy. And that was it for the next 45 years. Tim was the driving force in scheduling our annual campouts in Potter County, PA, which is halfway in between our homes. It was on these trips that Tim, his brother Todd, and I shared our lives completely. We had a routine. Campfires, conversations started with bragging, boasting, busting chops, and storytelling. And they quickly segued into serious topics, intimate topics, debates, and truth-seeking. Tim shared his deepest thoughts and vulnerabilities around the campfire. I can attest from the campfire times that Tim loved Glory completely, and he was soulmate. He loved Kaylee and Amanda, and he was so proud of the women that you guys have become. He loved his brothers, his sisters, their spouses, their kids, his parents, and everyone in his extended family. There wasn't a single relationship that relative that Tim had that he didn't love and care about. And I know this for a fact because he stated it. Without exception, during our campfire talks, we discussed theological and spiritual issues such as the rapture, Trinity, purgatory, and Tim's favorite, angels and exorcisms. But I can attest that Tim was a real believer in Jesus Christ. I recall Tim's opinion about the Bible verses in regard to being lukewarm. He believed he could wrestle with God about any situation, and he didn't hide it when he was angry or distant from God. He expressed his desire to know God completely. Tim surprised me the last time we were camping when he mentioned that he wanted to travel to the Holy Land in Israel and see where Jesus walked. Knowing that Tim passed in Christ is a real comfort to me. Tim was genuine and authentic. He considered himself a rebel, but in a good way. He hated formalities, stereotypes that society places on us, and he rejected false flattery and especially keeping up an image just to fit in. Tim was restless at times and knew his faults. In his last text to me, he described going through some things that he was sorting out. He had a good conscience, and it was very common for him to come back after a disagreement and apologize, and I would say over-apologize. He ended that text with, I'm going to give you a limpy next time I see you, but I know that means I love you. Tim loved his stories, and he had an uncanny way of capturing life's moments with a one-line phrase. He would pitch his voice, and exaggerate a word, and mimic a body language to create a memorable impression. Ahoy, ahoy, scratcheroonie. You failed, but it was really referring back to missing or scratching when you're shooting pool. Don't forget about the $5 you owe me. Went back to the bumped arcade money from when we were young. Pray for me. That was him mimicking me when I got an allergic reaction to a bee sting. Some of his other favorite sayings were, beer on Sunday? Nope, don't lend my tools out. 3 weeks of partying. Nailed to the cross. Too fast for you? Is that a Nishiki Chrome Molly? But his favorite line was, that is such BS. Except he said the whole word. All of Tim's sayings came from a story. They cultured a deep affection for our shared experience. This would draw you from the moment back to the memory. I think that Tim was really specially gifted this way. Tim even repeated stories about friends that I didn't really know well. In fact, from Tim's stories, I know their names. Randy, Kent and Craig Martin, Kenny Schobert, Tony Mash, Todd Russage, Eric Andy, and all the fun they had out at the chalet, working for Dennis, meeting up with Jerry, and there were many others. Tim would sometimes look at me and say, you know, you remind me of Keith Henry. So if there's a Keith Henry here, I'd like to meet you. I saved a letter that Tim sent me 40 years ago. In October of 1984, we were still in high school, and it was before we had our driver's license. This is what Tim wrote, just an excerpt. I got that song I listened to at Andrews, taped. It's called Dream On. I've been practicing it on the guitar. This weekend, Tony and I are probably going out to Rushford and staying there for the long weekend, going fishing. That will be great when you come up in November, then we can see each other again at Christmas. I've been planning some things, tricky, tricky, tricky. I am the tricky one. Your cousin Tim. It's funny, I'd forgotten what he meant, tricky, 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 but I can perfectly recall Tim saying it over the years and seeing his face. And about that song that Tim was learning, if you don't know it, Google the lyrics for Dream On by Aerosmith. I think the words capture Tim in memories and the present moment. Tim didn't spend his life pursuing wealth or curating an image, but to know him was to love him. We shared a life together full of amazing adventures, mountaintop experiences, difficult circumstances, practical jokes, but they all were full of abundant joy. Go away, I love you, and I miss you, and I cherish all the time I spent with you. Thank you. Oh, I gotta introduce Vince, sorry. Where Vince is.
Thanks, Steve. That's really tough to follow that. I apologize, I have a little bit of laryngitis. I'll try to speak as best I can here. Lori was talking with Rachel in the car, and Rachel said, "Hey, does anyone else have a chance to speak?" And said, Lori said, "Why does Vince want to speak?" And Rachel looked at him and says, "Do you?" And I don't know if I want to, but I feel that I'm supposed to. And my son Jake said, "Hey, do you have a speech prepared like Uncle Steve?" I said, "No, I don't." But I just think, I remember reading something by C.S. Lewis. He said, if you have three friends, friend A, he called them A, B, and C. He said, A and B will know each other in one way, and A and C will know each other in a different way. And when you bring them together, you get a fuller picture of who that person was. And just like to share my experience with Tim. For those that don't know, there's Tim was the firstborn. Todd was born, a year and a half, 2 years later. I'm about 10 years behind Tim. And then there's Uncle Andy, my younger brother. So growing up, Andy and I always looked up to Tim and Todd, and always wanted to be with them and their friends. And when their friends were over, we always thought they were the coolest and wanted to be a part of that. And then, I don't know, I think it was somewhere maybe about 10 years old, Tim and Todd decided to move out. And that was tough on us. And I know Tim had a difficult relationship with his dad, and he worked on that over the years. So then, yeah, Tim was a big part of my life, and then all of a sudden he was gone. And kind of reunited later, and I was talking with Steve. I said, "Steve, what are you going to say?" Just for ideas and not to overlap. Tim had a way of making people do things.
And you might not even know it until you actually did it. But you would be there laughing the whole entire time. You got a kick out of it. And everything that everyone has said thus far is so much true about Tim. Like, everyone has a different piece of him to carry on. And I think that everyone would want, or he would want everyone just to continue the stories. He thought of himself as a legend. And he is. When I was having to tell some of my friends, Tim,
he never missed anything I was involved in. He never missed a cheerleading game. He would drive me and he would be doing the cheers with me on the car right there. He had a few favorites that he would say over and over and over again. If you all know my dad, you know when he got something in his head, it was just over and over again. I remember there was a time where part of my cheerleading uniform wasn't dry yet, so